Hello and welcome to tutorial number 15 on the feeling, which is on these bassy glitches that play first in the build-up, then basically everywhere. Seeing as this track is ostensibly glitch hop, this is probably the most important sound. It's where the glitch comes from, though I'm not sure which sound the hop comes from exactly. Anyway, the general gist of this sound is that you make a weird sound that changes as much as possible, then render it to audio, chop it to pieces and rearrange them. Fortunately, while I was making this track 2 years ago, I knew I'd eventually want to make a tutorial on it, so I left it at the end instead of deleting all the patterns, etc. I didn't know it would take this long, but I'm glad it's finally coming around. Before we start, this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends.
Raid Shadow.
No, only joking. So if we scroll to the end, here's the audio that I rendered it to. I think the easiest way to arrange it into nice glitches is to chop a small slice, duplicate it into a glitchy rhythm, then use the slip tool to pick out bits with a nice sounding cadence. So that's the skeleton, now it's time for the meat. The original sound was made in Hammer, and here it is. As you can see, I just automated loads of things so that there's lots of variety in the glitches you get out. So, let's open Hammer and get cracking. First things first, 2 octaves down. Now it's just finding random knobs to automate. Some of the many knobs I played with that day were these ones, for the phaser. First I picked the deep mode, just because it sounds a bit more extreme. Then I set the keyboard tracking to 100% by middle clicking, so the filter shape follows the note you're playing up and down, preventing the timbre from changing with the note. Then the others were basically chosen out of dumb luck, specifically harmonic scaling because it sounds weird, then increase the speed, look for an offset position I like the sound of, and turn the mix down a bit. I didn't bother automating the phaser since it changes by itself anyway. Next, I picked the worst sounding unison settings I could imagine, or at least the most extreme. That is, 2 voices, and automating the pitch offset between 0 and 100%. So before we do that, let's plot down some notes. So basically, I wanted to vary the notes as much as possible. It doesn't matter how melodic this is, since we're going to be cutting chunks out of it in no particular order, and it's probably going to be so messed up that the glitches we make are basically atonal, so the notes don't matter much either. Nonetheless, it's probably a good idea to stick to the scale. So basically, I just slapped in lots of short, sharp notes, a few long ones, and plenty of slides. All you're going for here is variety. So I'll do that. Now we can put that in the playlist and start automating things. Can't hurt to repeat the pattern, seeing as it will be different both times around. So, time to automate the unison pitch offset, which I did more or less randomly. Next thing I automated was the timbre, again randomly and from min to max. Next was prism. First I made an automation clip, then copied the default prism value, which is off, double-clicked the name bar of the automation clip in the playlist, and pasted it onto the min knob. Now, the minimum value of the automation clip just disables prism, rather than making it negative, which it would have done earlier. Then, move the prism knob to somewhere sensible, say 20% or so, seeing as I'll never really want to move it above there. Then right-click this, copy, and paste it onto the automation clip's max value. Now the automation clip is automating it between off and about 20%, which is more sensible for this. And, just like before, I slap random values in there. Well, that's everything for Hammer, so let's move on to the effects. First up is OTT, which you're probably used to by now. Really just used it as a lazy EQ by turning the high band up, the mid band up, and, amazingly, the low band up as well. much more banging. I suppose seeing as we're going to be making glitches out of this, I wanted it to be loud, so you get short, sharp, powerful thuds, in theory. Next is Voco Decks, because I wanted something that could drastically change the way this sounds, whose mix level I could automate. And Voco Decks was the first thing that came to mind. First, do what I did to your mum last night, which is turn the wet up to 100%. Then, do what she did to me, which is increase the width to 200%. Then just pick through random values of order and number of bands until something tickles your fancy, which for me was an order of 4 and 50 bands. Then turn the filter flatness up to around 60% and decrease the pitch to around -600 cents. I'll level with you. I don't know what lots of these knobs do, and every time I Google it, I forget. So if you ever feel disappointed that you've no idea what you're doing, don't despair, because nobody else does either. Then I just automated the mix between the min and max values, and that's all the automation, as well as most of the effects. So what now? Rendering it to audio and chopping it up, and there's a neat trick for making glitches with this. The gist is that you record it in Edison while shuffling through randomized parameters for some effect plugin, then that's your render. So let's do that. First, let's slap another Voco Decks on the end and crack open Edison after it. Select the playlist section containing our pattern so it gets looped over, set Edison's recording trigger to on play, and hit record. In any FL plugin, you can right-click the preset selector arrows for this menu. At the end of this menu is a randomize button which picks random values for every knob in the plugin, even third-party plugins. Because it's such a pain in the ass to keep clicking the button, you can right-click and just press R for randomize. Normally this will cycle through presets or categories whose names begin with R, but if you enable tree display at the end of the menu, as I always do, it shows presets hierarchically. And because randomize just happens to be the only thing that doesn't begin with R in this plugin, you can just right-click the arrow and press the R key to quickly randomize. Ready? Hit play and race back to the preset arrows. Now just keep randomizing until you get bored. I'll play it through a few times. Okay, next up is the exact same thing, but using fruity flanges instead of Voco Decks. So let's do that. Alright, now we have 2 audio files containing miscellaneous sounds. To increase the variety I get when I'm using the slip tool, I cut them both into pieces and interleaved them, then rendered them into a single final audio file. The reason for this is so that as I'm slipping around, I don't know what effect I'm going to get, so all my glitches don't all have the same one. So I'll put one on top of the other, then slice them both every 2 beats, then interleave them with each other. That was satisfying. Now I just record this in Edison. Little tip for you. Have you ever wondered why some of your project files randomly have massive file sizes? Well, anything you record in Edison is embedded into the FLP, so if you have anything long in there you don't want to keep, delete it, otherwise you'll have a huge million meg project file to deal with. Now that's done, I routed it into a mixer insert and put some effects on it. The first is a Transient Processor. Basically, it's intended to emphasize each attack, so each glitch has a loud click to make their rhythm stronger and more noticeable. Basically, just turn 2 knobs to 50% and -50% and it's job done. Finally is a dimension expander to help them stand out a bit more. That's a size of 0%, which isn't actually 0 because you can still hear it, and a low wet value, about 25%. This is only slight because I don't want this to be hugely wide, just a bit of emphasis to make it less bland, I suppose, as well as acting like a very short reverb, since cutting up audio means each glitch instantly stops, which is a bit unpleasant. So that's more or less it. All that remains is to chop it up in the way I showed you at the beginning. Before I go though, here's a little trick to make it easier if it's a pain in the ass to get a nice rhythm in the playlist. Basically, start a new pattern, pick some drum, probably the kick, and figure out the rhythm you want here in the piano roll. You might find it easier to plot the thing you're thinking of here. Then, put this pattern in the playlist, mute it, and use it as a stencil to put your glitches alongside the notes, so they have the same rhythm. Then just delete the pattern, slip the clips around, and hey presto. Now that you've done all this, I recommend saving this long rendered audio somewhere, so you don't have to go through this fast every time you want glitches. Build yourself up a little sample library of sounds you can chop up to get glitches out of. Maybe after you've got a collection, you can mix and match different ones to get even more varied glitches. For now though, that's everything, so get the fuck off my YouTube page.